No worries.
Welcome back to another episode of Evoke Greatness. My guest today is Bryan Sagray. Bryan is a former foot and ankle surgeon who shifted his attention and his intrigue to what wires high performers, both physically and mentally. Today, he is a personalized coach for your brain, helping you rewire and reshape your brain by making small changes to live with intention and purpose through one-on-one coaching, focusing on mindfulness, physical wellness, nutrition, and connecting with nature. Bryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited. It's been long overdue, and I'm looking forward to hanging out with you and hoping we provide some good value to your listeners.
I know we will. It's been way long overdue. Bryan and I connected on LinkedIn, and we've been connected for a couple years probably.
I think,
And
yeah, like, yeah, 2.5 years maybe.
yeah. And so, it's fascinating that it took us this long. However, I think there will be some great value that we'll be able to provide to listeners from both sides. So I'm excited to dig into it.
Let's go for it.
All right. Well, you are all too familiar personally with high performance, right? Having been an ultra runner, a surgeon. So I'm curious for you, at what point in your life did you begin to recognize the effects that high performance really has on someone's life?
Yeah, I think for me, I definitely started to recognize it after residency and fellowship when I was actually there was no one else signing off on what I was doing, right? So it's like when you're a resident and even as a fellow, there's always someone, I don't want to say over you, but there's someone who is very meticulously and scrupulously kind of overseeing what you're doing, which is how it's supposed to work. And then when you're done with all that, right, and you're the attending surgeon and you're out on your own, it sort of hit me like, okay, wait a minute, like no one else is signing off on what I'm doing. It's all on me now. And so that brought a level of, I guess, stress and also respect, though, right? Like, because people, they trust you, they put you in that position. And I enjoyed that. But it definitely started to weigh on me really quickly. I mean, it's not looking for a pity party, and I signed up for it, right? But it's like after, a decade at 115 hours a week, getting up in the middle of the night, going to operate on, patients who have, had traumatic injuries, it gets, I don't want to say old, but little by little, this starts to sort of take its toll. And I think for me, yeah, it wasn't during my years of being an athlete. It was when I was out on my own, working in the hospital system, and just day in and day out, just grinding.
Yeah, and I think that adds up, right? I mean, I think most people can only take that for so long. And then it becomes kind of this element of really trying to recognize, number one, is this what I want, right? Is this serving me in my goals, in my life, personally, professionally? So I'm curious, this kind of leads into my next question. What led up to that turning point for you to be able to see that you may actually gain more fulfillment personally and professionally out of something other than being a surgeon? What did that look like?
Yeah, that was what was really wild. So I knew like that I always wanted to do something where I was, helping other people. I think that's what kind of got me into that profession to begin with. But it was sort of an element where, you know, I was teaching as a professor till I was the residency and fellowship director where I was. And so it was this element of like imparting knowledge to the students. But what I found was the most sort of fulfilling for me was most of the questions that, the medical students, the residents, the fellows, men, women, that they were asking me was not like medical or science related. It was like, how do I find time to go to the dry cleaner? Like, it's my wife's birthday tomorrow. Like, can I have the day off? Like, it was figuring out how to make this really strenuous and rigid profession where they like train you to be this super type A person, but you also like have a life. So everything that I was getting, all these questions, everything that was coming at me was like, how do I just function as a person? And I started to think to myself, I was like, wow, like nobody did this for me, right? It was like I was trained the more old school way, like literally stop complaining, stop being a baby, right? Just keep working, lie about your hours, right? You didn't work 80 hours this week, right? You worked 120, but you're going to just say you worked 80. So there was no support. There was no, wellness at all. It was just go, go, go. And so when I realized that what I was doing was having an impact on them, that's when I was like, there's more to this than just showing up every day.
And you had some familial circumstances come into the mix as well. What did that look like, and how did that really kind of help you navigate looking
Yeah.
introspectively at what matters.
Yeah, it's true. So, I grew up like really simple on a ranch in Texas, just me, my brother, mom, and dad, really close family, and really was blessed growing up with parents who were always there, right? And so when my dad passed away from his second round of lung cancer, I think for me, it was like, okay, wait a minute. Like my whole world just got flat. I felt like at the time, like everything that I couldn't figure out or everything that I was, achieving really well, it was like it just knocked me back down to ground zero. And it just brought me to a place where I was like, right now, family really is all that matters to me. I had lost touch with that because all my family was back in Texas. I had moved all over the US. We were back in DC at Georgetown. And it was like I was missing a lot of stuff, right? I wasn't showing up to a lot of events for the family and for holidays and stuff. And I think it was that moment where I realized like I can figure out a way to be present, but still do what I want to do. And all of that just clicked like at the same time.
And you're very open. You talk authentically about your experiences around burnout and hardships. And I'm curious if those things, did going through those things and being so open with those things, did they change how you started showing up for yourself and others?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, before it was like, I think just from the athlete standpoint and then, going through, medical school and all that stuff, it was like I just buried everything, right? It was like you just don't talk about it. You just deal with it. It's like, and then not to make it, but it's the truth, right? It's like growing up as a man in Texas. It's like you only cry at the Grand Canyon and at funerals, right? Like Ron Swanson from Parks and Rec. So it's like, it's one of these things where it's like, this is what you're taught. You're bred into this, type A personality. But then when I was in the trenches, like going through it myself, it was 100% like just a 180. And also, I talk about this a lot here too. Without my wife, I mean, she was the one really who came to me one day. I mean, I posted about this before, but she just came to me one day and she's like, you're not exercising anymore. Like, you're not doing any of those things that you used to anymore when we first met. Like, do you understand that? Like, she's like, you're totally disconnected from who you are. And the person that you are at home is like 100% different than who you're portraying or who you're being like at work. And I was like, wow, like I thought I was the only one that knew that, right? And she saw that, and that was when she was like, "You need to stop all of this and just literally do whatever you need to do, like for yourself." Right? And I think it was in that moment when I was like, "Wow, like that's incredible that she is more aware of what's going on, right, than like I was or anybody else was." So for me, that was like the wake up call right there, where I was like, "I'm going to use all of this that I'd been through, all of that experience and wisdom now, and how can I help someone else like avoid that, right, or give them the opportunity and the tools that I wasn't given and I had to figure out the hard way."
How challenging was it to navigate kind of away from the identity of surgeon, right? Because there's a sense of identity to it. There is a bit of a status to it, right? I think you and I have talked before about there's a lot of money that comes with it. A lot of money can get you a lot of things. And so how did you navigate that part of kind of separating yourself from that and almost reintroducing yourself to a new identity?
Yeah, that's actually really funny too, in a sense, because the healthcare system, not to get too much into that, but it's like it's become so much more money focused and patient focused, which is unfortunate, right? Everybody knows that. It's like, instead of being preventative care, it's like sick care. And so there's like just a few big payers now and players in the healthcare industry, and it has really changed. And so what was really ironic and kind of funny is when I was going through all of this, and when I lost my dad is when this big pivot happened in healthcare. And all of my close friends, at all these different universities around the US, they were like, how did you get a ticket out? They're like, how did you, so for me, it was almost like they embraced it, right? They were like, that's incredible that like you're going back home. You've always talked about wanting to do that. Like now it's not maybe the way you saw it going down, right? But I had a lot of support from a lot of people. I still keep in contact with most of my, colleagues around the country. And I think you know, my mom was the one who really told me, she was like, you're a surgeon. You're always going to be a surgeon. No one can take that away from you. So she's like, you can identify however you want, but she's like, that's just part of the process of like who you are. Right. So she goes, it's like all of that work that you put in wasn't for nothing. And I think that's what's been the hardest for me. I mean, I don't explain myself anymore. I just don't feel like I have to. But I think the hardest thing for me at first was the constant questions about, like, well, all of that school and all of those loans and all of that. I'm like, yeah, but you're going to, I mean, that was right, like 30 years, 35 years of my life. If I live to 80, I'm going to do that for another like 45 years? No way. I mean, not at the rate that I was going, impossible.
Yeah, and I love that you frame it like that because sometimes it's about how we frame it, right? So you could either make a choice to get stuck in an old identity, or you can choose to reframe that and create the future. And I think that's really
Right,
what you did. And that takes a sense of bold understanding of yourself, of the mental aspect of things, right? And I think that's why it so serves what you're doing now, because you've been through all this. And I think
right.
it's Ed Milet who says we are uniquely qualified to teach our former self. And so many
Right.
people
Yeah.
fall into that.
Yeah, no, it's true. And he's great, right? I love him. And I think he's so right. It's like people always, on social media and, with everything going on today, remote, and people are always asking like, well, who's your ideal client, right? Who do you work with? And I think that as a coach, I mean, I really can work with anybody, but ideally it's a past version of me or a current version of what I'm going through, right? And I think that's why, like, certifications and titles and all of those things matter and they have merit. But at the end of the day, it's like I would rather have someone who's walked the walk, who's been there before, and has at least experienced, right? Like some form of what I've been through in some way. I mean, so much of it can be translated and applied, right? Through different, you can distill these things down. But at the end of the day, it's like someone who is sort of that duck on the pond where it like looks really good on the surface, but then underneath it's like you're barely staying afloat. That is where I spent so much of my life. And I think it's so many high performers can relate to that analogy, right? They're like, yeah, by society standards, I look great. But then it's like they're broken. And that's where I come in.
And I think that is such a fine point that sometimes people fail to see is how much all of this ties in with high performance, right? High performance isn't you are stellar in the workplace and yet you are terrible at home. High performance isn't you are a marathon runner, but you're not taking care of your mental health. It's all of these things uniquely woven together really to create this high performance. And so, what would you say to someone who their perspective of high performance is I'm really excelling in work, right? But they're eating terrible and they're consuming stuff at home that they shouldn't be consuming, maybe physically, maybe mentally. How would you tie that together to really kind of help somebody see the picture of what real high performance could be?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So some people will use like an analogy of like different buckets, right? I'm sure people have heard of that before, right? It's like you have wellness, you have emotional, mental, physical, spiritual, whatever. I like the analogy of like a race car just because people know cars. I grew up racing and I'm still like a car junkie. So I think if you think about a race car, it's like in the basic standards, right? You have the tires. The car has to go into the pit and change the tires, right? And then the engine has to have the oil changed, right? There's different things you have to do depending on the track. And so what high performance really is that you never can have the car perfectly balanced, right? If the course that you're racing the car on has lots of turns, then the car needs to corner better and not go as fast. If it has lots of straightaways, it won't turn as well, but it has to be much faster. So your life is the same way. At any point in your life, no bucket or no car is ever going to be perfect. The key to high performance is to have you, the vehicle, be as optimized for your environment, right? So that means like if there's a point in your life where there's some grief or some loss going on, then you lean into the emotional and the spiritual aspect that you've built, those habits and those systems and those routines that you've laid down. If there's a part in your life where things are a little bit easier and they're going smooth and you're having a lot of wins, then you can let off the gas a little bit and coast and let your battery sort of recharge. So for me, high performance is about finding a way to have harmony, right? And all of those buckets or all of those things that you're trying to fill, and to know that at any one time, they're not going to all be full, but you have to optimize them to the environment that you're in.
I love that because that really brings everything together. And the car analogy, for those who can put that together, I mean, that makes the most sense, right? When all of those things are in harmony with one another, you have the best output you can possibly have. And that
Right.
transcends personal, professional, work, home, relationships, faith, fitness, all of those things. What do you say to someone? So, let's say you have a client who's they really have, I see that one of the biggest things that people struggle with is their nutrition, is their physical health side of things, right? And so somebody who is excelling at work and they're high performing there, but yet they're really struggling at home. They're really struggling with maybe what they eat or what they're putting in their body. How do you get someone to A, recognize that, and B, start to make those shifts to allow them to see that this is actually going to make you even better in all of the
Yes.
other facets of your life?
Whether it's like, they're drinking too much, they're snacking too much, right? They're stress eating, whatever it is. When it comes to nutrition in general, most of the time, that is what I tell people. It's a symptom of something else, right? So it's like usually someone is doing that because they're trying to cope with something, or they're trying to get away from something or hide from something. And so usually what I try to do is help them figure out, like, what's the root cause of that? Like, just through questioning and asking them and helping them dive a little bit deeper, I try to get them to understand, like, why are you overeating, right? Why are you snacking on junk food all the time? Like, is it you're trying to fill a void, or you're stressed about something, and so this gets that dopamine hit, right? Or is it like you're self-sabotaging because you kind of like that little bit of pain that it creates in your mind, right? Because everybody's different. And so usually there's something behind why they're doing that. And so if you can uncover what that is, and then give them new evidence and help them create this new pathway, this new narrative in their brain, then it's like before you know it, they've made a long-standing transformation, as opposed to just telling them, take the Skittles out of the pantry and throw them away. No, they're just going to buy more Skittles. You didn't actually find out, why are they eating 3 pounds of Skittles a week, right?
Yeah, I find that uncovering some of those things that are sometimes deep rooted, right? Sometimes they're from some trauma that's occurred, that's just you've pressed and you've pressed and you've pressed and you've pressed for 25, 35 years. And so to get there doesn't happen overnight, right? Because it really does take some time to get those layers off and start to unlearn some of the junk that we've just carried with us. And then I love coaching in general, because I think it allows us to introduce to people what's possible.
Right.
And when you're stuck in this whirlwind of feeling like I can never change this habit because it's so ingrained in me, or generationally it's been something that we've been doing forever. Well, no, there is that. And so I think that is the foundational element where a coach comes into place, especially when it comes to high performance.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's incredible too when you think about how, for 400 years, scientists and researchers literally believed that the brain was hardwired like the switchboard, of like an old telephone center, and that once something was there, it was there. And then now, this concept of neuroplasticity, or rewiring your brain, which is really what I help people do, it's a concept where they've now realized that what's really going on up there is, it's like how you upgrade the software in your phone. It's like the hardware is there, right? But you can change the operating system and get new features and new functions and new modalities, like, all of the time. And is it easy? No, but it's simple. And there's just different ways to do it. And that, I think, is where it really starts to change, when people understand that whatever you're telling yourself upstairs is not probably actually the way that it is. Your brain is tricking you because it's the saber-toothed tiger, fight or flight, telling you to do the same thing that you've always done because it's easy. It's trying to conserve energy, and it's normal. But you can, like, change that. It's easy, but it just takes work.
What are some of those tangible ways, those routines and habits that someone can start to, if they're wanting to update their software, right? As we're just talking about, I want to create new ways of thinking. What are some habits or routines that somebody can implement? They don't even have to be big, right? Because everything starts with a baby step. But what are some
Right.
things they can, three things they can take out of us talking today that they can put in place this evening?
I tell them the easiest thing they can do is to understand that all of the beliefs that are in your mind, that you're basing everything you do off of, right? So you have these beliefs, and these beliefs are going to determine your thoughts, And those thoughts determine your behaviors and your actions, which give you opportunity and results. That's how it works. It's very basic. But most people don't understand that those beliefs that you have, and almost everybody, they were formed when you were 7 or 8 years old. So when you tell someone that, it like blows their mind. And then they realize, wait a minute, like all of these decisions I'm making, all of this stuff I believe was from 40 years ago, sometimes 60 years ago. And so sometimes people just knowing that helps them challenge those beliefs or those lies that are in their head. And then the easiest thing they can do is I tell them, if there's something in your mind that constantly you think is really not true, or it's this falsehood, every time you have that thought, find three pieces of evidence that are the opposite of that, right? That disprove that. And if you can find those three pieces of evidence, which you could find way more than that, and you just tell yourself that over and over, then what happens is your subconscious finds that as the new evidence, and then it starts to recreate that path with that new information.
Love it. And those are things that, number one, we all know kind of how we create, how we all have this narrative, right? This narrative is this story that we tell ourselves about ourselves, true or not. It is one of those things that you have wired your own brain to continue thinking that way. And so it's not
Correct.
until you're introducing those new ways of thinking, or exploring that something else is actually possible, that you truly can. It's like a highway. It's like creating a new highway in your own brain. And that's the beauty of our brains, is they can be rewired.
Yeah, no, they can. And I think something that really brings it home for people is when I tell them, like, the concept of this that was originally discovered in, people who had actual brain injuries, or like had damage like to their peripheral body, and they could literally go in surgically and rewire and have a nerve that used to control one part of the hand now control another part of the hand. And they didn't understand, like, well, wait a minute, if the signal's coming from here, how is that working? It's because your brain is so plastic, it's so moldable, that if you give it a different input, it will give you a different output. That's the key, right? And how does that happen? By questioning and by challenging everything that you've believed for your entire life. That is the key, because if you can change your input, then you can change the output, right? And it starts with just really, really simple stuff. Just question what you're doing and why you're doing it. And that's the easiest place to start. And like you said, baby steps, right? Just do something every day for a month and just see where it takes you. But don't expect things to happen really quickly, because like you said, if you've got these big highways in your brain that are built, and you're trying to build this country little dirt road right across this highway, and you're trying to lay a new pathway down, it's going to take a long time.
Right. And something you said reminds me of something that I talk about, which is I equals IO, input in equals input out, right? And so the thing that a lot of people don't think about is what they're consuming. So to my kids, I say, be careful what you put in your ear gates and your eye gates, right? That's a biblical reference. But what we put into our ear gates and our eye gates, so the things we're watching, the things that we're listening to, the situations we put ourselves in, those really can those really can affect our lives negatively. And so one of the biggest changes I made years ago was, growing up, I would watch my mom. I'm raised by a single mom, and I would watch her get ready in the morning, and she would have the news on, and she'd have her coffee, and she'd get ready for work. So guess what? I'm 20, I'm on my own. What am I doing? I'm getting ready for work with the news on and my coffee going, right? And so it was just this pattern that was kind of ingrained. I started recognizing how it would give me this just awful feeling after I'd watch the news. And that was literally how I would start my day. And so what I did is, I'm like, I don't like how this is making me feel. I don't like where my mind is going with this. I would find myself like almost stressed out, and I could feel it physiologically impacting my body as I'm driving to work. I thought, what's something I can do, right? I'm going to peel back. I'm not going to watch the news in the morning, and I'm going to put something on in the morning. And so, over the years now, it's either a podcast or something where I'm filling my mind with something of value. I'm filling my mind with something that makes me curious or learning. But I don't think people understand the impact that TV or what you're listening to or the situations that you're in, those can truly negatively impact not only your mind, but physiologically, that can impact your health.
Huge. Yeah. There's actually a really, really good study, very good, well done study that said that in the morning when you wake up, if you consume social media or the news, which tends to be negative, right? It's like they're not the stories anymore about like, the neighborhood kid that won the spelling bee, right? It's like the stories that are like, where's the shooting at? Where's the bomb that blew up? Where's the weather pattern that's all messed up because we're burning fossil fuels, right? There's nothing positive. And so this study found statistically, like I said, really quality study, that in the morning time, if you consume social media or news for the rest of the day, you have a 27% likelihood that your day is going to be negative because you put input in. And so it set the tone for the rest of the day. And so that's one of the first things that I have clients eliminate is that I'm not saying like, don't watch news and get off social media. I'm just saying when you wake up in the morning, don't have that be like the first thing that you do, because that sets the tone for the entire rest of the of the day. It's sort of like if you're going out on a first date, or if you just meet someone for the first time, the first thing that you're going to do is not like make some witty humorous remark that's like some off humor. You're not going to do that, because then
Right.
that relationship is going to always be pointed by that initial thing, right? So it's the same thing with your day, and it is 100% what you consume is going to dictate what goes on up there, which is going to dictate what comes out, right? And it's true. I mean, they have found in modern society that all of these increased risks of like Asperger's and autism and Parkinson's and dementia, all of these things are literally being caused, not only, but are being partly caused by the increase in our society of white noise. So like literally the fan from my computer, the fact that we're living in cities closer to highways with all this white noise, right? We're living closer in apartment complexes where you can hear what's going on behind you, the TV's in the background. And so literally all this unfiltered information that comes in all day long, we don't realize how detrimental that is. And so that's why this concept, like you mentioned, of just disconnecting from that artificial world and plugging into something that's real actually can make you physically and mentally healthier.
Yeah. What is your opinion around this? Just happened to pop into my brain, and I'm curious just to get your opinion on it. What are your thoughts around biohacking efforts, right? So that can be a lot of different things. That can be nootropic supplements, that can be earthing mats, PEMF mats. What are your thoughts around that complementing your journey towards high performance?
Yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with it. I would tell people, if I could give them the best advice, I would say probably the three best performance enhancing drugs on earth, in order of which is the most important, I would say is sleep, without a doubt. Number two is nutrition. And number three is like mindfulness, right? And so I tell people nootropics, any other sort of like supplements that they want to take, any sort of like, people are really into these aura rings right now, right? To like help them monitor their sleep. And I'm fine with that. For me, I think the more that you can learn to do this stuff on your own, right, is more ideal, because at some point you may not have that, right? Like, who knows? All this stuff could go away. And so then what happens if like you can't do basic functions, right? I'm not talking about like being able to change your oil in a flat tire, but if everything goes to like hell in a handbasket, right? And everything that you do in your life is like based off of technology, like that's not good. So I tell people, use the aids, use the supplements, right? Use everything that you can to get you to where you need to go. But at the end of the day, the more that you can do with like what you were given, that's better, because the frequency and the vibration and all of this stuff that I believe in that is going on here, like that's not going on here, right? Like that's going on only in here and in like the natural world. So the more that you can tune into that, the better.
I love that because that doesn't require someone to go out and get all of these things, all of this equipment, all of these expensive this, that, or the other. It's truly down to the basic essentials, like almost going back to 101, right?
Yeah.
And
I mean,
that's
it's
available to everyone.
one, you asked for three pieces of advice. I only gave you one. The other one that I tell people is, most people set an alarm in the morning to wake up, right? Pretty common. I tell them, here's something that'll blow your mind. Take your phone, set an alarm 90 minutes before you want to go to bed at night, right? I call it a reminder alarm. When that alarm goes off, take your smartwatch, take all your devices, and just get them out of there. 90 minutes before you go to bed. Do that for 2 weeks and just tell me you don't sleep better. Don't change anything else. I don't care if you don't take melatonin. I don't care if you drink. I don't care what it is. Just get rid of any type of screen 90 minutes before you go to bed. Guaranteed you'll sleep better, right? That's it.
Yeah. And again, those are easy things to do. Uncomfortable, probably, because
Right.
we like to have our technology. People like
Yes.
to scroll until the minute they fall asleep and scroll immediately when they get up. But I would challenge people, try
I'm
that
telling you,
and
it
see the
was
difference.
it was so hard for me at first. I mean, my wife, she was teasing me. She's like, "What are you doing? You're like pacing." I said, "Well, my phone's in the other room." She's like, "Get out of here with that." I'm like, "It's hard, right? Because you're like right up until you go to bed. I don't want to miss anything." And now it's so funny. Like I've stretched it out. Now it's like an hour. Then it was an hour and a half. Now it's like 2 hours. And it's like every day I can't wait. Sometimes it's like 7 p.m. I take my phone, take my watch. It goes on the charger. I'm away from it. And I'm telling you, like immediately now, it's almost like when I do that, it just like it's hard to explain, but yeah, I challenge people to do that. When I was still practicing as a surgeon and I was really busy, of course, when I wasn't on call, my wife and I had this cute little like wicker basket that was up on the like on the mantle, and we would both like take our phones and literally put them like physically away from us, and it was like on date night on the weekends, and they just stayed in there. So that's another thing you can do too, is like do it with your spouse or your partner, and you guys will have much deeper time together, not just sitting next to each other on the couch with Netflix playing in the background and you're both scrolling on your phone. Like I hate to break it to you, but that's not spending time together.
That's right. And when you were describing that, it made me think of like it allows you to decompress, right? Like it allows you to because we're constantly being bombarded with notifications. That's something for me. I didn't realize, I mean, silly, but I didn't realize how much that comes through on a day-to-day basis and diverts your attention from what you're doing. This
Yep.
past Christmas, for the first time, I was previously a chief operating officer for a national company. My phone didn't go off. My phone didn't leave my hip. It was on all the time. And so this last Christmas, for the very first time in probably my adult life or since I've had a phone, I had some things going on. I thought, I'm going to put do not disturb on just for,
Yes.
this period of time. I ended up having do not disturb on for 10 days. And let me tell you, my brain first didn't know because you're used to every what? I mean, 45 seconds, something of some
Mm-hmm.
sort is drawing your attention,
Yep.
right? Whether it's your watch, whether it's your phone, there's some sort of notification or ding or buzz. And it was like for the first couple hours, for the first probably even couple days, it was like just kind of a strange sense of quiet and nothing dinging or buzzing in the background for me. And then I would find myself putting my phone away, and because the notification wasn't prompting me to look at it, it would go longer and longer
Uh-huh.
and longer. And I
Yep.
thought, this is something new for me. And so I,
Yep.
number one, would encourage people to do that. If, even if it's that intro to trying to really kind of get rid of your phone and have it on you less, start with that and disconnect
Yep.
yourself from the mental or almost physical, because our bodies do get used to, and it becomes like a physical response to like continue checking. So I'd encourage
It
people to
does.
try the do not disturb part.
You'll never even believe this if I told you, but in 2019, when I retired from surgery, literally my phone has been on Do Not Disturb. Every phone that I've gotten since 2019 with the vibrating button turned immediately when I get the phone for the last 5 years, literally. My phone has been in Do Not Disturb mode. My wife thinks I'm a total nut, but it was because when I was practicing surgery, I'm talking about like hundreds of phone calls a day, thousands of emails a day, thousands of text messages a day, literally, right? Like for real, not to impress you, but to just to impress upon you. And what's incredible is they say that in modern society, the average human has to make 35,000 35,000 decisions every day. Think about that, right?
Right.
And it could be more. And that's like scrolling, the text message, the notification, the email, 35,000. 100 years ago, we were making about 300 to 400 a day. It is a tenfold increase. So,
Mm.
like when we were farming the fields, right? And when we were like just doing the basic things, like the less is more, we weren't constantly decision fatigue, that concept of decision fatigue. And what's so scary about that is when your brain is mentally just exhausted, then it affects your physical body, your emotional. That's why all of this stuff is so connected. And so you're totally right. It's like, I just think of that purple icon with the moon and the do not disturb. I picture that in my mind as like an emoji. And I try to be like, how can I make my entire life where it's like, do not disturb? so that my attention is on like the people that I love, the things that I love to do, and then myself, right? Is that selfish? No. But that's the concept of like putting that oxygen mask on first, so then I can like show up, right? And so, yeah, I'm all for like the do not disturb mode. I mean, bring it on.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Well, you have, switching gears a little bit, you have an amazing presence on LinkedIn. You have north of, I think, 30,000 followers. Like I said earlier, it's how you and I connected. I'm curious though, so much comes to, we're used to navigating things online, right? Especially since COVID, we've had this, even like, everything went to Zoom meetings and team meetings, but then there became this kind of sense of fatigue around that. We craved personal connections. And so out of this presence that you've had on LinkedIn over the course of the last couple of years, and a growing presence and really kind of probably a growing identity on there, showing really more of yourself and what you're doing. What what are some of the exceptional yet almost like unexpected experiences that have come out of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I will tell you, I was, not to get too long-winded, like the most anti social media person ever. Like my wife is like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "If you grow like a man bun and like start wearing short pants," I'm just teasing, but if you know me and you know my wife, this is like hilarious because she's like, "What are you doing?" And it's so funny. It has changed my life in every sense that I can tell you. It's like I always was a writer and an artistic person. But I'm just telling you guys right now, like this whole concept of personal branding, that is like not where the good stuff is. The good stuff, what personal branding is it's like you get out there in the world and whatever helps you be vulnerable, right? And be authentic and put out there who you really are. If you truly put out who you really are, what happens is the personal brand is just a reflection of these values that you have, right? These virtues that you have that no one else has been ever able to see before, but now they can see them if you show them who you really are. And I mean, I'm telling you right now, like most of you guys probably know Darren McKee if you're on LinkedIn. Him and I are like, I mean, I mean, definitely he's my best friend right now. We talk like every day, right? It's like our families have gotten together, we've traveled together. And it's incredible how like I've gone on lots of retreats. I even traveled to another country to visit a LinkedIn connection. So it's like launch my business. But the biggest takeaway is I look at LinkedIn as what I call like a public journal in the sense of like, I think if whenever you write a post, you write that post literally for like you or like a future version of yourself or your son or your daughter or whatever, right? Like when I write a post, I'm going to tell you right now, like I like the post. I'm excited about reading it. I love putting it out there, and it's an exercise for me every single time. If someone else likes it, that's great. But anytime I try to write a post for you guys, for the audience, flat, right? It's like disaster. So then I go back to the drawing board and I'm like, just give the people what they want. And what they want is like a little window into who's Bryan, right? Who's Sonny? Who is this person, right? Like, who are you? Show me a little bit of that. Hit me in the feels, and then I've got them. You know what I mean? Then I've got them. And they can, I mean, whether there's a screen there or not, people know. I mean, they know if it's smoke and mirrors, right? It's people know. And so, yeah, that's my biggest takeaway from LinkedIn is like build the relationship here and just wait until you see what it does.
I love that. And there have been so many amazing in real life connections, but almost like just this opportunity, right? This sense of connection with people that we probably wouldn't ever run across in our day-to-day life, which is that's same with me. It's so incredible that you and I, we would have never crossed paths necessarily, in either of our hometowns.
No.
And yet we have this opportunity to have this mutual respect for one another, see the things that the other person has experienced, and then come together and, get on a podcast together and be able to record and share stories. Like that is the power of LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I mean, like I said, I haven't really been on any other social media platform, so I don't really have anything to compare it to. But from what I hear and what my wife tells me, she's like, thank gosh that you found this one. She's like, I don't think you would have made it probably anywhere else. They do like me on Reddit with the LinkedIn lunatics. I am kind of famous over there, but I will say, and I love it, right? Like I love to give them stuff to talk about. But I think like in general, I think that we are just barely seeing where LinkedIn's going to go. I'm just telling you right now, like if Microsoft, like if the people that are in charge at LinkedIn, like have a vision, which I think they do. I think they do an incredible job because they had no idea this platform was going to do this,
Right.
right? This is not like a resume. They had no idea. I think if they do it the right way, it's going to be something special that none of the other platforms are going to ever be able to do. And that's just my personal opinion. It's like there's a billion people here, and what 1% of people are active. So it's like it's like the Wild West. Like put your flag in, right? Like just claim what you want. But yeah, it's in a special place.
What would you say to those people who are like, I can't? I hear this a lot, and this is why I love to have conversation around it. Oh, you know what? LinkedIn is a professional networking site. Like, I can't put personal stuff out there. Or what if my job, sees something that I put out that's a little bit more personal? What would you say to those people who feel like their personal brand, they can't, that LinkedIn's not the place for it?
Yeah, this is great. So you've probably seen all this. I had someone, so Mother Nature just, when I get done running, it just does something to my hair that I can't control, right? And so you probably saw whenever I post videos when I'm just out walking after a run, I look like Albert Einstein, like stuck a fork in a light socket, right? And so yesterday I posted a video that did really, really well. And of course, there's people down in the comments that are like, what's going on with this guy's hair? Like, this is super unprofessional. And I don't like entertain that, right? But it's so funny because I'm like, what's unprofessional, my hair or like your comment about I mean, I don't say that, but what I would tell people is if you truly have like a corporate job, it's paying the bills, right? And you're truly worried about like, are my opinions and my core values in alignment with my company's, whatever, I'll tell you, have a conversation with them, right? Like the last company that I worked at, this big, huge orthopedic company, I had a conversation with them before because I met them through LinkedIn. And I told him, I said, look, I think I had like 10,000 followers back then. I said, I have a big voice on LinkedIn. I said, I don't talk about political stuff. I don't talk about, I don't know why I just did that, by the way. That's really strange. I said, but I love it. I said, I don't talk about political stuff. Like, I don't get into any of that. So you don't have to worry about that there. But I was like, everything that you've seen me put out, it's not going to stop. If anything, it's going to continue to get more prevalent. And they were fine with that. And so I think like, if you're worried about it, don't take the like, ask for forgiveness and not permission. Don't do that because what I would hate is for someone to like literally jeopardize their whatever. Now, if that's not an issue, I would tell you that building a personal identity or whatever you want to call it on LinkedIn is only going to serve you in a positive way if you do it like true to yourself. So I would tell them whatever reservation or hesitation you have, you know, let that go, and just try, right? It's like anything else in life. It's if you never do it and you just stay on the sideline, it's true. Like you will not fumble. You will not like trip going up, the stairs, right? You won't do that. I mean, the president of the free world trips going up the stairs like once a week. So if you're worried about being embarrassed, like don't be embarrassed about tripping. But the point is that if you don't get in the arena and you don't try, like Teddy Roosevelt said, right? Like if you don't try, then you can't win. It's impossible. So that's what I would tell people. It's like, be careful. If you're worried about your company, have a conversation. What are they going to say? Like worst case scenario, they say no. Okay, well then that's your decision to decide like where are my values, right?
Yeah, no, I love that. And it's about authenticity. And people, you talked about this earlier, but people recognize when you're not being authentic. And so I think people almost, it's more repelling when people get on and aren't authentic and are kind of playing this part than it is in the validity of them really showing up in a way that is true to them. And so it's like lean into that, you know?
Yeah, and I think like I don't know, for me it's like I mean life is hard enough as it is, I would say, right? Like the challenge is great, but at the same time like if I tell some kind of a story, like I don't want it 10 years from now have to be like, what did I say in that one post again? Right? I think it's harder to like be someone that you're not than to be someone that you are. Like obviously it's much harder to be deceitful. Now, usually what's going on is like the person is not comfortable with who they are, or they're not right, like really, confident, or they haven't found their voice, whatever you want to call it, right? So then they put something else out there that's artificial. But I will tell you, in putting out what really is you, you'll find that thing that you're looking for, right? It'll just you won't find it. You'll create it. You'll build it, right? It's not found, it's built. And so you will do that in the process of just being you. And you're gonna find that it's much easier. You don't have to keep your story straight. You don't have to wonder like, what did I say? What did I do? Right? It's much easier to not put on a veil and a cloak. It's just go out there and do it.
Right, right. Well, and speaking of authentically, you and your lovely wife, Lauren, you guys have such a fun relationship, and you show that side on LinkedIn as well, which I absolutely adore. You did you showed a text string the other day, and I was
Oh
laughing
gosh.
hysterically. I'm like, hashtag relationship goals, like, because my
Yes.
husband and I are similar. Like, we try to have fun with each other, and so as you think about the laughter and the support that go into a healthy marriage, a healthy relationship, what are a couple of tips that you'd give others for maintaining the fun and yet the health of a relationship or a marriage?
Yeah, this is really good. And can you believe that like 50,000 people looked at that? Like, what is wrong with people, right? It's so funny. No, I'm teasing. No, I think, and this is something I've started to do a lot more in my own practice, right? I've started working with people a lot more on relationships because this is coming through, right? They're seeing that, like you said. I think one of the most important things to remember, and this has kept Lauren and I so strong for these, gosh, it's been like 15, 16 years now, is those things that you loved about each other when you first met, right? Like the identity, like what I loved about Lauren, right? Like she was an outdoor wilderness, right? She was a thinker, she was a reader, right? She was totally different than me, right? It's like I met her and she had an Obama sticker on her car. Right now she goes to the ranch with me, right? So it was like I tell people, whatever it is that you can do when you first met someone, and you love those things in them that kept them and gave them their identity, don't lose sight of that and don't try to change those things about them, right? Really give them a voice to be who they were like when you guys first connected. I think that's really, really important to not try to change what brought you together in the first place. And then I think the other thing that is really, really important, especially nowadays more than ever, like don't be ashamed if you have to schedule the date night, right? Or if you have to like have things fit into your schedule, because if you don't make time for it or set aside time for it, which is probably something better to say, then it's never going to happen. And so I think those are the two things for us that have been so, like, you want to grow together, but you also don't want to outgrow those things. Like, because when you first meet someone, it's who they are. Your identities haven't become one yet, right? So it's like when I met Lauren, it was like who she was that very first time I saw her. I'll never forget it. It's almost like if you've read the book Green Lights, and Matthew McConaughey talks, he has a great relationship with his wife Camilla, and he talks about like that first time he saw her in the bar in California, and it was like they both just knew, like right then. It was like, I think when you're not looking is when you find that person. And I found her because of like everything that she was. And so that to me is something I tell people all the time. It's like just celebrate that. And that will keep you really grounded as you grow together. But don't change what brought you together.
So, man, I can't believe we're almost an hour in, and I feel like we could keep going on and on, just digging into everything. But I want to make sure that everybody knows, where to find you, where to, if they're in need of some high performance coaching, the examples that you've given today are really resonating. Where can they find you? Where can they follow you, get your content?
Yeah, I would tell them LinkedIn is the best place to find me. I'm totally, send me a connection request, follow me, come to my profile, click on the link, book a discovery call with me, or just follow along in the background and read more of my content and see if it speaks to you, and reach out, have a conversation. I tell people you never know where that one call or that one question may take you.
Right. Awesome. Well, make sure, if you do nothing else, make sure to connect and follow with Bryan on LinkedIn. So much good stuff, so much real life happening out there, and so many relevant examples that he's had from his life that he's really sharing with that audience. And so definitely would encourage that. Bryan, thank you just for your time and your willingness to be open and show up fully here on the show with me.